Welcome to Dish and Nutrition Podcast, where we dish on trending nutrition topics, all the while making it easy and fun to understand. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. It is just me today. Emma had to step out from this recording, so you just have to listen to me ramble today, and I hope that's okay with you. Today, we are continuing our pregnancy, baby series, whatever you want to call it. We are talking about postpartum nutrition. It's a critical yet often under-discussed phase of motherhood, the postpartum nutrition aspect. The postpartum period, often called the fourth trimester, is a time of immense physical recovery, hormonal shifts, and obviously you caring for this newborn that you just push out into the world. Maybe you had it in a C-section. Regardless, your body is recovering from a traumatic. Honestly, there's no other word to describe how you brought the child into the world other than traumatic. Traumatic is often seen as like a negative connotation, but it can be a positive thing too. But regardless, your body has gone through so much, and what you eat during this time can profoundly affect your energy, mood, and your recovery. So whether you're newly postpartum or just supporting someone who is, this episode is for you. We're going to get into the very first section, which is called Why Postpartum Nutrition Matters. And the postpartum body is in a state of healing and restoration. So you just grew this child for months and supporting that growing baby and enduring the physical toll of delivery. Regardless if you had a very hard birth story or a really easy one and the baby came out in 20 minutes, your body still has to recover from those 9 months of creating and just building this beautiful little baby, but it doesn't take away from the fact of how hard your body worked. And then if you did have a traumatic delivery where, hemorrhaging, tearing, whatever it may be, the beauty of motherhood, your body needs nutrition to help heal in this phase. Nutrition during this period is, if not more important for obviously mom, because baby is no longer inside of mom. You need proper nutrition to rebuild tissue and recover from childbirth, regardless if that means you had a huge tear or you hemorrhaged, like I said before. You need to support that hormonal balance. During this postpartum phase, which can last up to 2 years, you're going to have hormone dumps. You're going to have hormone surges. All that is completely normal, but the nutrition that you feed yourself during this time can help mitigate some symptoms that can come with those hormone imbalances. And then you want to provide energy for the challenges of the new parenthood. You're obviously not going to be sleeping, 8-10 hour stretches like you were, which if you delivered at full term, you know that you weren't sleeping in full stretches anyway, because it gets so uncomfortable at the end. But what I'm saying is obviously your sleep is going to be fragmented. You are needed at a higher capacity from this little newborn, and you need the nutrition to fuel yourself for that. And then, of course, you need to promote milk production for those that are breastfeeding. However, I do want to give a caveat. Since breastfeeding alone is a topic that really needs thorough conversation, this episode is going to be strictly for just moms in their postpartum journey, and then we'll get into breastfeeding next week. That can go into this series of pregnancy nutrition and everything like that. I just think breastfeeding alone is a very not heavy topic, but a very thorough topic that needs to have its own episode. So this is just for mom. This is just for healing post-birth. And then next week we'll touch on that breastfeeding. But without adequate nutrition, postpartum moms can experience prolonged fatigue, nutrition deficiencies, and harder time just managing overall stress during this fourth trimester. So let's unpack what we should focus on during this time. All right, so we're going to get into essential nutrients for postpartum recovery. Get out your pens and papers. You're going to be tested on this later. Just kidding. Okay, so the very first essential nutrient that is recommended for postpartum recovery, protein. This is just a large macronutrient umbrella. Protein is obviously essential for tissue repair and recovery. The recommendation is to aim for about 75 to 100 grams per day. So much like when you're pregnant, that is about the same recommendation, but it's for different reasons. And now you are repairing now that the baby has left the body. And you can get those from sources like eggs, lean meats, beans, lentils, and even tofu. It supports muscle strength, which is obviously crucial for holding and carrying your newborn, but it also repairs everything that went down under when you gave birth, regardless if you had a C-section surgery or if you gave birth vaginally. I would say it's really hard to say like what is the most important nutrient for postpartum, but it would be hard to argue to say that protein is one of the most, if not the most important, just because it is the basis of recreating that muscle tissue and just repairing your body from the basically atrophic state that your body was in when you're creating this baby, just because, you know, it takes so much from your body. So protein, super, super important, 75 to 100 grams per day, if not a little bit more, just to help out. But that is the general recommendation. And the next essential nutrient for postpartum recovery is going to be iron. Iron is particularly important after blood loss during delivery, and some moms can bleed 8 to 10 weeks postpartum, so we definitely want to watch our iron stores, and foods like red meat, spinach, fortified cereals can help replenish those iron stores. This is just as important. Honestly, these mimic a lot very similarly to the last episode of pregnancy nutrition, but just you're using these stores in a different way now that you've given birth to baby. Your body needs this iron, specifically if you are losing blood. That there goes your iron stores. There it is. There it goes. So you need to replenish. That is so, so pivotal. Specifically, if you are deficient in iron, we all know, like, even if you just stand up, you can get woozy if you have iron deficiency. So just think of that even more when you have a crying baby I want to say every 2 hours, but it's honestly about every 5 to 10 minutes. So at least in my case, of course, it's going to be different for every mom. But you can pair iron-rich foods. I said this in the last episode. You can pair iron-rich foods with vitamin C sources like citrus fruits to enhance absorption. So you really want to focus on the absorption as well. Another tip, I touched on it last episode, you can cook in cast iron skillets and that iron will leach into the food, or you can use this little fish that you can put in your water while you're boiling pasta or whatever it may be, and it can increase the iron amount as well. Super cool, but definitely important to have iron on the forefront of your mind just because it plays such a pivotal role in energy and obviously for different biochemical things throughout the body. And even more so if you are actively bleeding from delivery and or if you're just in that postpartum phase where bleeding is very common. Another essential nutrient for postpartum recovery is zinc. A lot of people don't think about zinc when it comes to postpartum. Zinc is involved in every phase of wound healing, including membrane repair and inflammation. Just as a whole, basically, when you're postpartum, you are a walking wound, basically, because the baby's gone, the placenta's gone. You have a plate-sized wound in your uterus, and that is not to be taken lightly. So you need to focus on foods that can help with that wound healing, and zinc is a huge nutrition point where you can focus on. When I was in my clinical rotation during my dietetic internship, we had a wound healing team because during acute care, you know, bed sores are often the plague of everything if you work in acute care. And we really had to focus on zinc because it helps so much with like bed sores and just wound healing in general. So zinc during postpartum phase is just as important. The sources of zinc are going to be meat, such as beef, pork, and lamb, and dark meat chicken. It's going to be higher available in dark meat chicken versus the lighter meat. Seafood is super high in zinc, such as crab, lobster, and oysters. Fun fact, oysters contain the most zinc per serving of any food. I'm not a big oyster fan personally. I tried it in Scotland. Not a fan. But you know what? You're a newly postpartum mom. Maybe you deserve a lobster dinner. Are you listening, partners who are enduring this postpartum period with the mom? Get her a lobster dinner so she can focus on her zinc. It's for her health. You know, she deserves that lobster dinner. But other sources of zinc are going to be nuts. Cashews and pistachios are super high in zinc. Beans, black beans, and chickpeas. Dairy, egg, cheese, and yogurt, and then whole grains, oats have zinc in them as well. So it's not a very thought about nutrition aspect in the diet when you think of postpartum, but it's super important for wound healing. And I can't think of a bigger time other than like if you experienced something catastrophic and had this large wound, but this is a time for wound healing. In the same thought of wound healing, Vitamin C is another essential nutrient for postpartum recovery and wound healing. Vitamin C can promote tissue repair, minimize inflammation, and protect against infection, which is obviously very important when you have a newborn in the house. You want to have a very good immune system, so even vitamin C can play a role in that aspect, and it contributes significantly to the body's ability to recover from injuries. And like I said, this is a very large time to think about that you are quote unquote injured, if you will. Vitamin C promotes and accelerates the regenerative process, and ascorbic acid, which is another fancy term for vitamin C, is that essential nutrient that the human body cannot synthesize on its own. So remember, you have to get it from the diet because it does not store it. Its significance in wound healing has been extensively studied and recognized for decades. Again, when I was in my clinical rotation, along with zinc, we would recommend vitamin C just to help with those wounds. Again, huge plate-sized wound in your body. Get some vitamin C in you. You can get vitamin C from a lot of fruits and vegetables, but including oranges, kiwi, cantaloupe, watermelon, red bell pepper, strawberries, potatoes, cabbage, and pineapple. Throw those into your diet. You really want to hone in on that vitamin C for that wound repair. Another essential nutrient for postpartum recovery is going to be the omega-3 fatty acids, particularly DHA. This is, I think, the third episode that I have mentioned this, so I will not bore you again with all the stuff. You can go back to the previous 2 episodes to talk about what DHA and EPA are. But just a quick reminder, they're vital for reducing inflammation and supporting mental health. Omega-3 is highly linked to your mental health, and fatty fish like salmon and mackerel are going to be great options. And if you are plant-based, you can get sources from chia seeds and walnuts, which can also help that omega-3 fatty acid. I'm not minimizing it by the importance of it by just skimming over omega-3 fatty acids, but this would be the 3rd episode in a row that I talked about it. I just don't want to bore you, but you can go back, listen to it, and it's just as important as everything else. The next essential nutrient is going to be B vitamins, particularly B6 and B12. Those are highly linked to supporting energy levels and mood stabilization, which I'm going to touch on postpartum depression and all the things that come along with that. But just something to keep in mind when you are in your postpartum stage. Some foods that you can focus on to get these vitamins are going to be eggs, poultry, and whole grains. Those are fantastic sources. So very easily added into the diet, but B6 and B12 are very important for that postpartum moment in time. And this next essential nutrient is not going to be a pretty topic, if you will. Fiber. So unfortunately, when you're postpartum, as if you didn't have enough on your plate, many women experience constipation postpartum. So unfortunately, we got to focus on our fiber intake. It's just as important during pre-pregnancy and pregnancy, but even more so during postpartum. I know, honestly, when I left the hospital, I just went straight to the grocery store, bought some Miralax, just because after all of that mess of delivery, it's just, you don't want to think about it. So to minimize uncomfortability in the bathroom, we're going to focus on our fiber too. And obviously I have a whole episode regarding fiber, but you're going to want to focus on plenty of fiber from fruits, vegetables, and whole grains to support that digestion, to just minimize that uncomfortableness. You've already gone through so much. You brought a baby into this world. Let's just get some fiber in us, and let's not put that onto our plate too of struggling with constipation. Because if you did deliver vaginally, I did not have a C-section, so I cannot speak to the experience of pooping after birth. But if you did experience a vaginal delivery, you know how uncomfortable that whole mess is. So let's get some fiber in us, just mitigate that uncomfortability, and just move on. It's not pretty to talk about, but it is the human body, and unfortunately, we do have to talk about it. And in the same breath, hydration. We want to aim for 8 to 10 glasses of water. Remember, this is not for breastfeeding mothers. This is just for mothers who are postpartum. And you're going to adjust that based on your activity level and your individual needs. If you are breastfeeding, you are going to need more. But again, this is just for the postpartum moms who may be formula feeding. We will get to the breastfeeding next week. But hydration is a key factor that you want to focus on during postpartum, just because it plays such a role in wound healing and, of course, moving all the things in your digestive system. And hydration is just important regardless, And also, you might have postpartum sweats. I don't know if anybody else experienced this, but you have lots of changes going on in your body hormonally, and that can cause sweating, and that's a loss of fluid. So you want to focus on your hydration, even just for that aspect as well too. All right, now we are switching gears into mental health and nutrition. So we don't want to forget about the connection between nutrition and mental health. The postpartum period can be emotionally challenging, and what you can eat can make a difference. So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but foods rich in omega-3s, B vitamins, and even magnesium can help regulate mood and reduce the risk of postpartum depression. I want to be abundantly clear when I say can reduce the risk. It does not completely eliminate that you will or will not get postpartum depression. This is a very interesting field of research just because postpartum depression has so many different variables that can cause it. But specifically speaking to the nutrition aspect, some nutrition deficiencies that may be linked to postpartum depression can include vitamin D deficiency, zinc deficiency, magnesium, iron, and folic acid deficiency. Again, if you have these deficiencies, it's not going to say like, oh, you're 100% going to have postpartum depression. This is just the linkage that they have found during studies that if you have deficiencies in these areas, there's a higher percentage that you could have postpartum depression. Now, I'm going to get a little bit serious. And if you haven't, this is already kind of serious, but I'm going to get even more serious. If you haven't been able to tell, postpartum is very close to my heart because I personally struggled with postpartum depression for 11 months with my daughter. So I hold this time very close to my heart. And I'm very, very sensitive to those who may be struggling and don't realize it or do realize it. I just hold a lot of space for those people. So that's why I'm honing in on this fact. And if you haven't experienced postpartum depression or known anybody who has struggled with it, consider yourself blessed because it is an awful thing to go through. It is so lonely. Even if you have the best village and support system, you can feel like you were the only person around for miles and miles. So I'm just letting that know that this is very close to my heart and very serious to me. But it's important to remember that if you do experience postpartum depression, it is not your fault. While there are links between nutritional deficiencies, like I just said, it is 100% not caused by that. And sometimes postpartum depression is just random and is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain that you cannot help during that postpartum period. I cannot stress this enough. If you're feeling persistently low or overwhelmed, reach out to a healthcare provider. Nutrition is only one part of the picture, and professional support is absolutely critical. My quick story of postpartum depression, if you're someone who knows me, you've probably heard this, and I have shared this on Nutritional Sarah platforms before, but my experience with postpartum depression was pretty textbook. The first 6 weeks, the first 2 weeks you have what's called baby blues, which I hate that term because it's just like, yeah, you're most likely going to be sad in the first 2 weeks, which I don't feel like should just be brushed off. But of course it is. Anyway, so the first 2 weeks I felt these quote unquote baby blues and I was like, okay, maybe this is normal. And then the baby blues just like didn't go away. I was just sad. I felt so alone. It was a feeling of despair. Despair is honestly the only like adjective I can put with it. It just felt like a season of hopelessness. And I felt so guilty because I had this beautiful, healthy baby. My husband was home for weeks on end. Thank God the Air Force allows like paternal leave. So I was very fortunate that my mom flew out. I had a wonderful village and support system, but I could not shake this feeling of despair and like loss of meaning. It was the weirdest phenomenon. So that went on. And at my 6-week checkup, I told my doctor like these feelings. And then of course you do the little test of like postpartum risk assessment. And she was like, yeah, okay, you're a little bit high on the risk assessment, but honestly, you just need to get more sleep. And I didn't know how to feel. I felt very brushed off. I felt very dismissed. I felt as a new mom just offended, honestly, because I didn't think that was fair to come in here. I had tears and I was telling her like, I don't feel okay. I love my baby, but I don't feel okay. And she just was like, you just need more sleep, which I'm not negating the fact that the lack of sleep and sleep deprivation does not play a role into mental games, but the doctor said I was fine. And I thought in my head, I was like, okay, maybe I'm just over exaggerating how I'm feeling. So I tried really hard to not focus on it. And I shoved it down essentially for the next few months. So by the 3-month period, I had gotten significantly worse. I barely got out of bed. I did not want to get out of bed. My husband had to take the baby just because there would be crying spells and I just didn't know why. I felt so hopeless. So I made a decision. I was like, okay, I'm going to call my OB again just to really, I don't know, check in on this again, because this surely is not the motherhood that everybody was talking about. So I call my doctor. She sees me. Again, I cry to her and I'm like, I am miserable essentially. And she finally realized, okay, never mind. You do have postpartum depression. And then she sent me a referral to a therapist in town that was not even seeing patients. So unfortunately, my OB kind of dropped the ball on that. And I'm not saying that was her forefront. Her forefront of mind is babies and pregnancies. But I did feel dismissed. However, then she gave me a referral for someone in town that was not accepting patients. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this into my own hands. And I thank God that I had the wherewithal to do so, because I don't know where I would be, what I would have done if I didn't decide to get the support that I needed. So that next day I called a therapist that was in town, took my insurance, and there was like a 3-month waiting period. And so I called to the receptionist and I just like bawled on the phone. And I was like, I really need help. Can you please just get me in? Something's got to give, and I need help from someone who's like an actual professional. She was like, okay, let me see what I can do. She calls me back an hour later and she's like, how about tomorrow? And I was like, that would be fantastic. So the next day I was able to be seen by a licensed professional, and she was able to do talk therapy with me. And I saw her twice a week for a few months, and then it dwindled down to once a week. And I am so thankful for her, and I attribute a lot of my progress in that with her. But even with talk therapy sessions like multiple times a week, I was still mentally struggling, and I realized the next step was going to have to be medicinal. So I went to my primary care physician. People don't really love if you go to your PCP or psychiatrist, whoever you can get your hands on, honestly, in this postpartum experience. I told her my symptoms. I told her I was going to therapy, but I still needed support. And then I started medicine to, help out that deficit that I could not get over myself. And I know it's a controversial take or controversial whatever, but I thank God every day for modern medicine and being able to help me during that, because it helped me so much. It did not cure postpartum depression. Let me be very clear. I did not get out of my postpartum depression until Harper was almost a year. But with the support of therapy and medicine and having the support of my husband and my mom and whoever was around at the time, that is what got me out of postpartum depression. And unfortunately, some people suffer longer, some people suffer shorter. It is not one size fits all. There is no one recommendation that you can give everybody who does suffer with postpartum depression. So that is why it's so important to advocate for yourself. That is why I went out of my way to find a therapist who took me on, because my OB did not really take me serious when I told her that I was struggling. You have to be an advocate for yourself, and you have to take stock in where you are in that season of life. So again, if you are struggling with postpartum depression or any other postpartum mental health issues, please consult your doctor, OBGYN, and be an advocate for yourself, and do not be dismissed. There are some helplines for postpartum depression. There is the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline. This is in the U.S. You can call or text 1-833-852-6262 for free confidential support 24/7. Counselors are available in English and Spanish, and there are interpretative services that are available in over 60 languages. And then we have the Postpartum Support International Hotline, PSI. This is for international, but it is important to know that this Postpartum Support International is not a crisis hotline and does not handle emergencies. You can call or text 1-800-944-4773 for information, encouragement, and resources. PSI also has an app called Connect by PSI that includes online support groups, a peer mentor program, and weekly calls with an expert. And if you are unfortunately experiencing a mental health crisis or an emergency, you can call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You can call or text 988 for free confidential support. The postpartum period is a time of healing, adjustment, and just incredible change. So focusing on nutrient-rich foods can support your body's recovery, energy, and emotional well-being. But remember, it's totally okay to ask for help and take shortcuts when you need. Your health is just as important as this new baby's. If you found today's discussion helpful, please share it with someone who you think might benefit. Or if you are going through this postpartum period and you found this benefit, I am so glad you're here. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. But until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it. Thank you guys so much for joining us this week. I know it got really mentally heavy, but honestly, it would be a disservice to you all to not share my postpartum experience and hopefully help someone who may be in the same trenches as I was. Or if you are someone who doesn't experience postpartum depression, I'm so glad you're here. And I hope you are enjoying this new season of motherhood. I know a lot of people, like my sisters, they never struggled postpartum in terms of like postpartum depression. It is not everybody is going to have postpartum depression, but those who do suffer from it, I want you to know that you are not alone. I support you. I hear you. I see you, and you can get the help you need when you need it. Focus on those nutrient-dense foods. Take time. Take a nap when you can. Enjoy those snuggles. My gosh, enjoy those snuggles. Get a really good smell of that newborn smell. Oh, it's my favorite. But I guess with that, you have been dished.